She will never say this out loud, but the moment a woman meets a man, her primal brain is already asking one question. Is he a force or just another man trying to impress me? And the brutal truth, by the time most men send the perfect text, craft the clever joke, or try to prove their value through logic and personality, the decision has already been made. Not in her conscious mind, but somewhere far older, long before language, long before dating advice, long before anyone cared about your job, your status, or your carefully constructed persona. Deep inside the limbic system of her brain lives something ancient, primitive, ruthlessly efficient, and that part of her doesn't respond to explanations. It responds to signals. Signals most men were never taught to send. Here's the curious paradox. The men who try the hardest to be liked are often the ones her mind quietly filters out, not because they lack value, but because they trigger nothing unpredictable, nothing primal. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli observed something about human nature that most men in the modern world still fail to grasp. Power was never about convincing people. It was about shaping what they feel because emotions decide long before logic even enters the room. And when it comes to attraction, the man who controls emotional tension controls the entire game. So let me ask you something. Why do some men barely try, yet women become fascinated with them? Why does one man's silence create intrigue, while another man's attention creates boredom? The answer lies in something most dating advice completely ignores: the primal brain. Today you're going to learn a method inspired by Machiavellian strategy. 5 principles that don't rely on approval, validation, or constant effort. They work by doing something far more disruptive. They disturb her emotional equilibrium because the primal mind doesn't crave comfort. It craves stimulation, tension, mystery, a pattern it cannot fully predict. And the moment you become that pattern, something very strange begins to happen. You stop chasing. And without quite understanding why, she starts moving toward you instead. But before we continue, understand this. What you're about to learn sits in the shadows of psychology. Most relationship advice is built to make you comfortable, predictable, safe. This is not that. This is the language her conscious mind rarely admits, but her body has spoken fluently for over 200,000 years. Let's begin. Principle 1, the phantom presence. Machiavelli once wrote that a prince must learn when to be present and when presence weakens his position. The same law governs attraction. Most men fail for a very simple reason. They are always available, always replying, always there. They believe consistency creates attraction. And to be fair, it does create something. Trust. But trust is not desire. Desire lives in the gap. The distance between what she has and what she feels she might lose. The moment you erase that gap by being constantly accessible, the electricity disappears. Because her primal brain was not designed to relax around certainty. It was designed to pursue, to hunt, to move toward what retreats. Think about it. Every dopamine system in the human brain is triggered not by possession, but by anticipation. The gambler doesn't feel the strongest rush when he wins. He feels it while waiting for the result. When the outcome is uncertain, attraction runs on the exact same chemistry. When you are always there, the waiting ends. The dopamine drops. There is nothing left to anticipate. She doesn't wonder about you because you've already answered every question before she had time to ask it. The Machiavellian method reverses this dynamic. You become the phantom presence. There, then gone, warm, then cool, close, then distant. Not randomly, strategically. You engage her fully in the moment, you make her laugh. You lock into the conversation, you make her feel seen. And then, right when the connection reaches its peak, you disappear. No long explanation, no dramatic goodbye. You simply withdraw. And in that moment, something subtle happens inside her mind. What psychologists call an open loop. The human brain hates unfinished patterns. It wants closure. So, her mind begins replaying the interaction. Your last sentence, your last look. The exact moment you left. Her brain starts constructing explanations for your absence. And with every replay, you become more present in her mind than if you had stayed. That's the paradox. The phantom presence isn't cruelty. It's architecture. You're building space in her mind. A space that belongs to you even when you're not physically there. She starts checking her phone more often, scrolling through old messages, rereading something you said, wondering what you're doing, who you're with, why you've gone quiet. This is not insecurity you're creating, it's hunger. Because the primal brain does not crave what it fully possesses. It craves what might slip away. Most men believe being a good guy means being available, reliable, constant. But constant presence turns you into something dangerous for attraction. Furniture, something useful, comfortable, but invisible. Furniture is always there. No mystery, no tension, no pull. The phantom is never furniture. The phantom is an event. When he appears, it matters. When he speaks, she listens differently because his presence is not constant. It's scarce, and scarcity always increases value. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He watched rulers who appeared too often among their people slowly become ordinary, predictable, replaceable. But the leaders who mastered distance, who made every appearance deliberate, those men became legends. You must apply the same discipline. Don't flood her messages. Don't rush to reply. Don't fill every silence with nervous words. Let the silence breathe. Let the absence exist. And when you do return, return with presence. Make the moment count. Make the interaction feel different from everything else competing for her attention. Over time, she begins associating you with a feeling she can't quite explain, a pull she doesn't fully understand. That pull is her primal brain recognizing a pattern it was designed to chase. Scarcity signals value. Uncertainty creates arousal, and absence, when used with precision, becomes obsession. This is the first pillar, the foundation of Machiavellian attraction. You don't win by being everywhere. You win by making everywhere feel slightly empty when you're not there. Principle 2, controlled chaos. Her brain is built to detect patterns. That's not romance. That's survival. For thousands of years, the human mind learned one simple rule. If something is predictable, it's safe. And safety is comfortable. But comfort rarely creates desire. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology existed. He warned rulers never to become fully predictable to their people. Not fully feared, not fully loved, balanced. Because the moment people can predict you, they stop respecting you. And the exact same law applies to attraction. The moment a woman can fully predict you, something subtle happens in her mind. She relaxes, not in the good way, in the I've already figured him out way. Her brain quietly files you under known. And once that happens, the curiosity dies. Think about the advice most men follow. Be consistent. Text her every morning. Always show up the same way. Be dependable. That advice creates stability. But stability doesn't create obsession. It creates roommates. The primal brain doesn't monitor the predictable. It monitors the variable. The thing that might shift. The person who might surprise her. That's where controlled chaos enters. Controlled chaos means your emotional rhythm is never completely flat. One day you're warm, present, engaged. The next day you're busy, distant, slightly out of reach. One conversation you're deep, thoughtful, philosophical. You talk about life, ambition, meaning. The next time she sees you, you're lighter, playful, almost indifferent. You laugh things off. You change the tone, and suddenly she's adjusting to you instead of the other way around. Now understand something important. This is not emotional instability. It's calibration. There's a difference. Unstable men lose control of their emotions. Controlled men vary their expression of them. And that variation does something powerful to the human brain. It keeps attention locked in. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. You've seen it before. Slot machines. Sometimes they reward you, sometimes they don't. And that unpredictability makes the brain obsessed with the next pull. The same mechanism exists in attraction. If your attention is constant, she adapts to it. It becomes normal, expected, boring. But when your warmth appears in waves instead of a constant stream, something shifts. Your attention starts feeling valuable, something she has to catch at the right moment, something she doesn't fully control, and suddenly she's paying closer attention to you than she intended. She notices your mood, your tone, your timing, your silence. She starts asking herself questions. Why was he distant today? Was he busy? Or was something different? Did I say something? Now you're inside her head, not because you begged for attention, but because you disrupted the pattern. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most men refuse to accept. Being endlessly nice rarely creates deep attraction. It creates comfort, and comfort fades into the background. Machiavelli once wrote that people remember intensity far longer than kindness. He observed that humans are more emotionally marked by tension than by steady approval. You don't need to hurt a woman to trigger that intensity, but you do need to shake her emotional rhythm a little. Controlled chaos does exactly that. You pull her closer. Then you step back. You show warmth. Then you cool the temperature. Not enough to push her away. Just enough to remind her she doesn't fully control access to you. And that tension creates emotional range, highs, lows, curiosity. And emotional range is what the mind remembers. Years later, she won't remember the man who was always agreeable, always supportive, always available. That man becomes background noise, wallpaper. She remembers the man who made her feel something unpredictable, the man who kept her slightly off balance, slightly awake, because her brain never fully solved him. Most men are terrified of creating uncertainty. They believe if she ever feels unsure, she'll walk away. But in reality, the opposite is usually true. Certainty kills attraction. Predictability kills tension. Boredom kills everything. Controlled chaos keeps her engaged. Because safe men are everywhere, predictable men are everywhere. But the man whose rhythm she can't fully read, the man who never feels fully owned, that man is rare, and the primal brain always chases what feels rare. So stop performing the script. Stop responding the same way every time. Vary your timing, shift your tone, be intense one moment, detach the next, not to manipulate, to stimulate. Because the woman who never fully knows what version of you she'll encounter will never fully stop thinking about you. Principle 3. The Machiavellian Mirror. Machiavelli once wrote something most men overlook. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Now think about that for a second. Because in attraction, that idea becomes a weapon, a very quiet one. The ability to reflect a woman's inner world back to her while revealing almost nothing about yourself. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The human brain, especially the primal brain, is deeply self-focused. Not in the shallow social media narcissism sense. In the evolutionary sense, every human being is wired to look for their own reflection in others, their values, their desires, their worldview. When someone feels like they understand you without effort, something very powerful switches on. You've probably experienced it yourself. You meet someone and within 10 minutes it feels strangely easy. They get your humor. They understand your perspective. They say something that sounds like a thought you've had 100 times but never said out loud. And in that moment, you think, finally, someone who understands me. That feeling is addictive, and it creates bonding faster than almost anything else. But here's the Machiavellian twist most men never realize. You're not revealing yourself. You're becoming a mirror. Most men meet a woman and immediately start performing. They list accomplishments, talk about their ambitions, explain their opinions. They try to prove they are interesting. They try to prove they are valuable. But performance creates distance. Because the moment you perform, she becomes the audience. And attraction rarely grows from an audience. The mirror works differently. The mirror observes. It listens carefully not just to the words, but to the gaps between them. You notice the moment she hesitates before answering something personal. You notice what subjects make her eyes light up. You notice the stories she tells with pride and the ones she avoids finishing. The subtle insecurity behind confidence, the quiet loneliness behind independence. And slowly, without announcing it, you reflect those things back to her. Not by repeating what she said, by matching her frequency. If she values depth, you speak in ideas. If she's drawn to adventure, your energy becomes spontaneous. If she's cautious and guarded, you don't rush past that wall. You meet her at the same pace. You let her feel understood before she feels exposed. This is not deception. It's fluidity. Machiavelli advised rulers to adapt themselves to the nature of the times. Rigid leaders break. Adaptive ones dominate. The same rule applies here. You adapt to the psychology in front of you because the primal brain doesn't fall for the man trying to impress. It falls for the man who feels strangely familiar, like someone she's known longer than she has. Comfortable yet intriguing. Recognizable yet difficult to fully read. And here's the deeper psychological trick. She's not falling for you. She's falling for the version of herself she becomes around you. The version that feels understood, the version that feels interesting, the version that feels seen without needing to explain everything. And once she starts associating that feeling with your presence, you become very difficult to replace. Most men panic at this idea. They hear mirroring and immediately think it means being fake. But history says otherwise. Every great seducer, diplomat, and strategist understood the same uncomfortable truth. People rarely fall in love with your truth. They fall in love with the feeling that their truth is understood. Your authenticity can come later. After the connection is already rooted, after her primal brain has quietly decided you belong in her world, the Machiavellian mirror works because it bypasses her defenses. She's not analyzing compatibility. She's not running logical checklists. She simply feels like you already understand her. And that feeling is disarming. In practice, this often looks very subtle. You make small observations. You seem like someone who spends a lot of time thinking late at night. I get the feeling you're careful about who you really trust. You strike me as someone who hates shallow conversations. Notice something. Those aren't questions. They're reflections. And when they land correctly, you can see it in her face instantly. A small pause, a slight smile, a look that says, "How did he know that?" That moment is powerful because in her primal wiring, feeling understood triggers two very important emotions at the same time: safety and excitement. That combination is rare, and rare experiences imprint deeply. Machiavelli understood that true influence doesn't come from forcing people to notice you. It comes from making people feel that you notice them. The man who masters the mirror does not chase validation. He distributes it carefully, deliberately, and when you offer that kind of understanding sparingly, something interesting happens. You slowly become the one person whose validation she actually wants. Principle 4, strategic tension. Machiavelli understood something most men today completely ignore. Too much comfort weakens authority. A ruler who gives people constant peace eventually becomes invisible to them. Familiar, ordinary. Respect fades. The same dynamic exists in attraction. Comfort doesn't slowly weaken desire. It kills it almost instantly. The moment a woman feels completely comfortable with you, when there is no tension left, no uncertainty, no emotional edge, her brain quietly changes the category you belong to. You're no longer a man she's evaluating. You become a companion, safe, predictable, neutralized. And most men walk straight into this trap without even noticing. They try to remove every ounce of tension. They rush to clarify intentions. They rush to prove affection. They rush to make things comfortable. But attraction was never designed to live inside comfort. It lives inside tension, not stress. Tension. There's a difference. Stress pushes people away. Tension pulls them closer. Tension is unresolved energy. It's the moment just before something happens. The pause before a kiss. The silence after a dangerous sentence. The look that lingers half a second too long. That space between what is and what might be. That's where attraction breathes. Think about a moment you've probably experienced before. You're sitting close to a woman. The conversation slows down. Your eyes meet. There's a small pause. You both feel it. That quiet electricity. Now, here's the mistake most men make in that moment. They panic. They rush to break the tension. They talk too much. They laugh it off, or they jump too quickly and kill the buildup. But the man who understands tension does something different. He lets the moment breathe. He holds eye contact just long enough to make her slightly aware of it. Then he looks away. He sits close enough that she feels your presence, but you don't rush to touch her. You say something that could be flirtation or could just be a passing comment, and you never clarify which. Now her mind is engaged because the primal brain doesn't react strongest to what happens. It reacts strongest to what might happen. Possibility is intoxicating. Certainty is dull. Think of tension like stretching a rubber band. The more you stretch it, the more energy builds. Most men snap the band immediately. They confess feelings too early. They kiss too soon. They make their intentions painfully obvious. And once everything is obvious, the mystery disappears. The electricity collapses. The Machiavellian approach is different. You stretch the tension, you build it. You create moments where something could happen, but doesn't. Not yet. This is psychological foreplay, and it's far more powerful than anything physical, because her body reacts before her mind even understands why. Her breathing shifts slightly, her focus sharpens, her pupils widen when you hold her gaze a moment too long. These are ancient signals, primal responses, and they are triggered not by certainty, but by potential. Machiavelli once wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Translate that into attraction, and the meaning becomes clear. It is far better to be desired than to be comfortable. Desire requires space, distance, restraint, the constant feeling that you could escalate, but you are choosing not to yet. That yet drives the primal brain crazy because tension without immediate release creates obsession. She starts replaying the interaction later. The moment you looked at her, the moment the conversation paused, the moment she wondered if you were about to lean in, and every time her mind replays that moment, you are occupying space in her head without doing anything. Strategic tension also reveals something important. The woman who immediately loses interest because you didn't rush to validate her. She was never wired for depth in the first place. But the woman who leans into that tension, who holds your gaze, who matches your energy, who seems almost energized by the silent push and pull, that's the woman whose primal brain recognizes strength. A man who isn't overwhelmed by her beauty. A man who doesn't rush to prove himself. A man who can hold the moment without collapsing it. And that creates something extremely powerful, investment. Because the moment she starts trying to read you, trying to decode your signals, trying to figure out when you'll finally move forward, she's already emotionally involved. She's already playing the game. So, learn to appreciate the pause, the silence, the moment where something almost happens, but not quite. Master the rhythm of moving close, then creating space, escalating slightly, then holding back. Not as a trick, as control. Because the primal brain rarely bonds with the man who gives everything immediately. It bonds with the man who makes her feel like she's always one moment away from winning something valuable. Principle 5, the sovereign frame. Machiavelli's most brutal lesson was simple. You cannot control other people, but you must control yourself completely. In attraction, that principle becomes the final weapon. Frame. Frame is reality. It's the invisible lens through which every interaction is interpreted. And whether people realize it or not, every conversation between a man and a woman contains a silent battle. A battle over whose frame defines the moment. Her frame usually sounds like this. You pursue. I choose. You prove yourself. I judge. Most men walk straight into that structure without even noticing. Her beauty unsettles them. Her attitude throws them off balance. Her little tests make them nervous. And suddenly they're reacting, trying harder, talking more, proving more, seeking approval they never needed to ask for in the first place. And the moment that happens, the power dynamic is already decided. Because the primal brain doesn't respect the frame it dominates. It respects the frame it cannot break. The Machiavellian method demands something different. You establish what I call the sovereign frame, a psychological territory where your value is not negotiated, not argued, simply assumed. Now understand something important. Sovereignty is not arrogance. Arrogance is loud insecurity wearing expensive clothes. Sovereignty is quiet certainty. It doesn't shout. It doesn't defend itself. It simply exists. You've probably seen this type of man before. Even if you didn't recognize what you were witnessing, a woman throws a small test his way, a sarcastic comment, a slight challenge, something meant to see if he'll flinch. Most men react immediately. They defend themselves. They explain. They try to smooth things over. But the man with sovereign frame, he just looks at her. Maybe he smiles slightly, as if to say, without words, that was cute. And the conversation moves on. Another common test. She tries to trigger jealousy, mentions another guy, mentions attention she's getting, waiting to see if you tighten up, waiting to see if your confidence cracks. A reactive man competes. A sovereign man doesn't even enter the arena. His frame quietly says, I'm not competing for attention. I am the standard. Or she withdraws attention completely, goes quiet, stops replying, not because she lost interest, but because she wants to see if you'll chase, if you panic, if your emotional stability depends on her responses. Most men fail right there. They double text. They over-explain. They try to pull her back, but the sovereign frame stays still. Your life continues. Your attention remains scarce. Your energy doesn't spike just because she pulled away. And suddenly something shifts in her perception. Because Machiavelli understood a brutal truth about authority. The moment you start defending your position, you've already weakened it. True authority does not argue for itself. It simply behaves as if it belongs. The same rule governs attraction. The moment you start explaining why she should like you, why you're a good guy, why you're worth a chance, you've already stepped out of your frame and into hers. The sovereign frame does not beg to be evaluated. It evaluates. It assumes value without needing applause, not in an arrogant way, in a calm, grounded way. A man who knows exactly where he stands in the world. Her primal brain reads this instantly because real confidence triggers something ancient in human psychology. In evolutionary terms, the man who holds his frame under pressure is the man who leads, the man who doesn't panic, the man who doesn't crumble when challenged. And that signal still matters to the primal brain even if modern culture pretends it doesn't. Something interesting happens when your frame doesn't break. The testing slowly stops. Because tests exist for one reason, to identify weakness. When weakness never appears, the need for testing disappears. And what replaces it is something much more powerful. Respect, curiosity, attraction. Now she's no longer trying to destabilize you. She's trying to understand you because she's finally encountered something rare. A frame stronger than her own. For a woman used to men collapsing under her beauty, men apologizing for existing, men begging for attention like starving dogs, that kind of stability feels like oxygen. The sovereign frame does not bend to her moods. It does not panic when she's distant. It does not celebrate excessively when she's affectionate. It remains centered, calm, unshaken, and that stability becomes the ground beneath the interaction. Machiavelli once wrote that the prince who relies on fortune will collapse when fortune changes. The same applies here. The man who relies on her validation, her attention, her approval is finished the moment her mood shifts. But the sovereign man doesn't rely on her for emotional stability. He can appreciate her, desire her, enjoy her company, but he does not need her to feel complete. And that non-neediness is one of the most powerful attraction triggers in human psychology, because the primal brain chases what doesn't chase it back. It moves toward what remains unmoved. The moment you stop needing her validation, something strange begins to happen. She starts seeking yours. Your frame becomes the center of gravity. Instead of you orbiting her world, she slowly begins orbiting yours. And in that reversal, something powerful is created. Not because you are the most handsome, Not because you had the most money, not because you said the perfect lines, but because you were the one man who didn't break. Everything you've heard here lives in the shadows of human psychology. The primal brain doesn't care about modern dating theories. It doesn't care about fairness or social scripts. It responds to signals written into human biology long before any of us were born. Scarcity, uncertainty, strength, frame. You can reject this knowledge. You can call it manipulative. You can pretend attraction works differently, but the body doesn't lie. When you withdraw and she pursues, when you stay calm and she relaxes around you, when you hold frame and the tests disappear, when tension builds and she can't stop thinking about you. Those aren't coincidences. Those are ancient patterns playing out exactly the way they always have. Machiavelli didn't invent power dynamics. He simply observed human nature and wrote down what most people were too afraid to admit. This is no different. You didn't create these triggers. You're simply learning to speak a language her primal brain already understands. The real question is what you'll do with that knowledge. Whether you'll use it with discipline, with control, with intention, or whether you'll ignore it and keep playing a game whose rules you never understood. Because now, you do. You now understand something most men will never see clearly. Attraction is not logical, it's primal. And the man who learns to speak to the primal brain doesn't beg for attention, he commands it. Before you leave, let me give you something to think about, because everything you've just learned, the phantom presence, controlled chaos, the mirror, strategic tension, the sovereign frame, all of it leads to one moment that almost every man completely misses. A moment most women don't even realize they're creating. A test. Not the obvious ones. Not the playful teasing or the attitude you can see coming. I'm talking about the one silent test she gives often without realizing it herself that decides something very quickly in her mind. Whether you are temporary or whether you are a man she cannot easily replace. In the next video, I'm going to break down exactly how that test works, what it looks like in real interactions, and why most men fail it in the first few seconds without even noticing what just happened. If you think you understand the game now, wait until you see that. That video drops tomorrow, but for now, don't leave yet. If you want to go even deeper into how the primal brain responds to power, tension, and psychological signals, watch the video appearing on your screen right now. YouTube is recommending it to you for a reason. Click it, keep watching, and you'll start seeing patterns most men walk past their entire lives. And if this video opened your eyes even a little, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and stay close to the channel. Because the men who master this don't stop learning. They sharpen the edge quietly, consistently. Most men will never understand the game, but you do. I'll see you among the